Hello and welcome to another episode of Frame and Reference. I'm your host, Kenny McMillan, and today we're talking with Simon Dennis, BSC, about his work on the Hulu program Candy, which is a lot of fun, great show if you haven't seen it. Simon's awesome. We do a lot of nerding out, as it were, on this one, as we are wont to do. Talking about the craft of cinematography as well as, things you do and don't do, a little bit of extra David Fincher standing. Again, as we are wont to do. A little surprise, I snuck it in on him, but we got to talk about Doctor Who a little bit because he shot an episode of Doctor Who, and I'm a big Whovian, as it were. So, I absolutely loved this conversation, which, again, for this program is not rare, but a lot of fun, and I think you're going to enjoy it. So I'm going to let you get to enjoying it. So please enjoy my conversation with Simon Dennis, BSC. So the way that we usually start all these podcasts is kind of just by asking how you got into the creative field. Were you always a visual person? Did you always, love movies and come from that? Or were you like an architect first? Or how did that kind of come about?
Well, that's a great guess. Actually, I wanted to be a graphic designer when I left school back in the day. Which I sort of pursued, and I went on a graphic design course, which is kind of tentatively linked to advertising, I guess. So in a way, I was sort of edging towards filmmaking, and I always loved films. Movies were my passion. So I remember when I was at art school, I was doodling a lot, like movie posters. I think I was even storyboarding stuff. I was obsessed with Blade Runner at the time, I remember.
Sure.
Yeah, and I kind of, long story short, one of the part of the remits of this course was to do a little 20-second video. I mean, literally like what was it, VHS cameras we had? Yeah. So I kind of did that, and I felt like, oh, this is kind of interesting. And it's a long pathway I took, but I went basically to two film schools. I went to an art, like an audio visual course, and then I went to more of an official film course in Scotland, where initially I was going to be like, I want to be a director. Everyone wants to be a director. And then I knew nothing about cinematography. Didn't even know that it existed. I thought the director shot, the movie. So part of the remit of that course was to sort of do a little, everyone kind of basically meddled around and played in every kind of department, as it were. So sound and hair and makeup so part of that was to actually do a little like a cinematography module, and I was like a kind of light bulb. Literally went in my head and literally went on set. I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And I realized then I'm kind of a timid person, I'm introverted, but I was like, I don't think I've cut out to be a director, but this cinematography thing is kind of cool. So I bought a 60mm camera with all the money I had and started shooting. And then, I graduated, I started shooting music videos with my friends and shot my first movie 20 years ago for David Mackenzie, who you may know of. He did Hell or High Water, and stuff like that. And then I sort of just snowballed, really. I just sort of was just sleeping on many couches, earning probably no money, but I was very passionate, and I loved whatever I could do to get another piece of my reel together, and you just, persistence, isn't it, in the industry, persistence. So I was very persistent, email, well, whenever email was invented, back at making show my age now, but so that was it. I mean, now I'm up until about 5 years ago, I was shooting a bunch of great stuff in Europe. I'm from England, and I got an email from a completely random email from a DP that was working on Ryan Murphy shows, and that led to Ryan Murphy shows, which I've done 6 of, and here I am.
Yeah. There's two things you touched on there. One, that whole, like I think everyone starts that way, thinking they want to, people who want to get into film start thinking, oh, I want to be the director. Cause you just assume it's like the director. Yeah. And everyone else. Yeah. You're like, oh, I want to make the movie.
Yeah. Yeah. The general is, the general, like, you look up to that kind of mantle and that image of and I knew who Steven Spielberg was, and everyone knew, and it's like
I was literally about to say,
yeah. I mean, that's the classic, but yeah, no, I mean, I used to sort of dabble in editing as well. That was my other sort of sidebar. I sort of weirdly ended up cutting a movie that I shot. They fired the editor. It was a long story, and the director was like really, like sort of. He was just in a tight spot. So I said, well, I'll come in. So I started cutting this movie and I started cutting all the pretty shots together,
Yeah.
My work, and this was a really fascinating learning curve as being an editor. Is you start to then show scenes to the director and they'll be like, something quite off about this. And I was like, maybe I should cut in the best performance. Maybe, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
It seems obvious, but at the time I was just it was a big learning curve. So I've also got an editing background. So when I come on any production, any set, I hope I'm really useful to a director to have that kind of background as well, albeit, a few things.
Yeah, no, that's been parroted numerous times on this podcast, is like how being an editor absolutely makes you a better DP.
Absolutely. I mean, you can kind of, it's like chiseling away at the importance, you kind of get to you kind of peel back all the layers to what's really freaking important about what you're shooting and what you end up not even considering. It's funny, you see, being in an editing bay, you would just turf out shots without even cutting them in. It's like, no. But so you realize the importance of coverage, which I hate the word of, but coverage is, it's getting less and less of a coverage type world we live in now. We're living in a very cinematic TV universe, so it's very exciting.
Yeah, the shoot the shit out of it and hope for the best in the edit.
Right.
Is definitely something that I wouldn't say I learned in film school. Like, it wasn't taught to us, but as students, we were like, well, we'll just shoot every angle as much as we'll do the whole scene 15 times from 15 different angles.
Yeah.
2 takes, Yeah.
It's interesting though, because the process of editing is obviously you're receiving a collection of decisions, and those collection of decisions can be everything. I was talking to a camera operator friend who's on a show right now, and some directors have still got that muscle memory of just shooting the wides, the mid wides, the overs, the singles, the insert. You can do
compulsive
all that.
Filmmaking.
Yeah, but the thing about it is I think, a lot of directors say that their work is made in the edit room, which is, I think, totally fine. I think as long as the edit is very disciplined, so it doesn't show that kind of mass, it just shows the decisions of, they've maybe just taken 10% of what you shot, but because you've shot what you've shot, they've got every option. Whereas I personally love to just try and keep it kind of very lean. I mean, in fact, one of the episodes of Candy was with a director called Ben Sevenoff, he's an operator for a number of years, and most notably on Ozark, which
I just interviewed Carl Dennis.
Right.
No, hold on. That's your last name.
No.
The guy, the DP from Ozark.
Okay.
Blanking on his name right now. But
it's a razor sharp show. Very little camera movement. It's all about great framing and very sort of specific choices. And Ben was interesting because he said to me, I'd sooner spend 2/3 more time lining up 2/3 less coverage. As in, you'd focus on just the needs that you need within, say a scene would be maybe 4 shots. You can do it in 4. You can do it 1, But he would be like, I think this scene is just this and that little insert. And I was like, great. So he would just spend much more time building those important frames than spending less time on a lot of frames, which is, I think, is the true craft of filmmaking, really. Yeah.
Well, it's also like in any creative industry, let alone film, there's an element of fear. You don't get really, that bite at the apple. And
exactly. That's what the operator just spoke about in that thing. He said that the director was sort of scared. He was like, I don't think I've got enough. And it's like, well, you've already got the wide and the medium and the close up and the overs.
Yeah.
But yeah, to me, it's each to your own. The discipline of filmmaking, I think, is just personal. But the more I've been on set, the more I like the language of I wouldn't say it's even being daring or taking risks. It's just being respectful to what you're shooting. It's like you know. I mean, I actually remember I did a show called Peaky Blinders in the UK, and Tom Hardy's in that. And the first day with Tom, we had this director was like, I want to do a Steadicam shot following. I'm going to be on the back of Tom, his character, and I'm going to follow him down through all these. It was in a underground brewery. And it was probably about, I don't know, 40 seconds of screen time before he even does the first line that's in the script. So already I was like, they're never going to use this shot.
Right.
And Colin was like, oh, let's see, you know. And they used the shot. And it's 40 seconds of screen time that TV is back. I mean, that was a few years ago now. So now it's not necessary about being like cutting a lot of stuff out in order to fit it into a box. Because that's what they basically do, because it's all transmitted. Right. Now, because of streaming, everyone doesn't really know this. Well, you are knowing it, but every single episode is a few minutes here, a few minutes there. Right. So you're watching a new language now, which is really, I find quite exciting.
Yeah, you definitely do see. It's kind of a bummer as a viewer sometimes, because you're like, wait, this episode, you know, you're waiting once a week and you're like, this one's only 32 minutes. Yeah. The last one was 59.
Like, I mean, Mandalorian, man, that show was like, I mean, how edible was that show? I mean, you could watch that show in one evening, like that. You know, what is it?
I did
30-minute episodes. I mean, they really kind of went tight, you know, in a very like digestible way, I guess. But it didn't even feel short in some cases. But it's like definitely an exciting time.
I was going to say that show. I just finished watching all of Picard and Halo.
Oh yeah,
which, by the way, I was watching the trailer for Candy. I haven't had a chance to watch the actual show, and I was like, "Is that Master Chief? He's got a mustache!" Like,
oh my god, yeah,
he is, isn't it? He's a good actor. But that did bring up a point about what you were saying about, you know, kind of being more considered about your framing and all that is, I just read a quote recently that I thought was kind of apropos, and it was like, the actor more or less only has to nail it once and the crew has to nail it every single time.
That's a famous quote. Yeah.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
So
I don't know which film, there was a famous filmmaker that said that, and I kind of have a similar one that I take away as DP, and again, I don't know who ever said this. I read this somewhere many years ago. He said that there's good lighting, there's bad lighting, and there's the right lighting. And
I think that was Gordon Willis.
It probably was, and he's my hero. So, and like, you know, talking about a disciplined filmmaker, you know, he was like one of the most. Well, I mean, there's probably every reason why dark cinematography evolved because of him. You know, Everyone still looks up to and still studies his work. I mean, I still try to figure out which grid cloth he used and diffusion. It's like what filtration he used, but apparently it's in his coffin. You know, it's
Well, and you know, that's funny. I was talking to Jeff Cronenweth, and he was kind of.
Oh my god, he's another one of my heroes. Yeah,
absolutely. Oh, I actually, during the not recorded part of the podcast, this is a little peek for anyone listening, but I was kind of like, hey man, I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little freaked out because he like informed my cinematography, like a bunch of people did, but he definitely has a large chunk of it.
Yeah.
So I was like,
dad, of course, you know. So like,
yeah. And so I was like, I hope this doesn't feel like an interrogation, because I already had everything I ever needed to ask him just in my head. You know, a lot of times I meet DPs, I don't really know their work, and I have to do some research for him. I'm like, I've got every American cinematographer you've ever been interviewed in, you know.
Yeah.
But funny, he was saying,
sorry,
go ahead.
No, I was going to say I actually met. So I never really try to meet my heroes, but I was at the ASC Awards earlier this year, and Jeff was there. And I was sat at the Panavision table, and Dave from Panavision was like, "Oh, hey Jeff, come over here." And like I was like, "What?" And there he was, right 2 feet from me, and I was like, "Oh my god, don't screw this up!" And I was just like, I'm a massive fan. You're my hero. And and again, it's so nice to meet cinematographers out there that, to this day are very kind of like still grounded and down to earth. And he's like, don't be stupid.
That's exactly what he told. He was like, shut the fuck up, man.
I'm a human being like you. Like, yeah, yes, I've shot freaking amazing shit. But that was kind of a cool moment.
Yeah. No, I won't say what he told me, but basically he was like, yeah, I said that to someone before and I felt dumb. Right. So don't worry about it. You're good. And I was like, okay, thank you. But in our conversation, he was saying that he was kind of lamenting dark cinematography for darkness' sake, because it is so, people like Gordon Willis and kind of him really have put that image of like, that is cinema. I was just talking to my friend Joey Famelli about lenses, and I was like, really, your lens choice. Something that Matthew Duclos said was, there's no bad lens, there's only the right lens for the right job.
Right.
And format and which lens you pick and the lighting is kind of informed by everything prior. There's no wrong way to use an anamorphic. You can use an anamorphic for a comedy if you want. You just tend to not. It doesn't fit the audience brain. And so that darkness cinematography is one that I think none of us have left, because it's just so good. It just feels correct.
It does. Yeah. It's interesting, because I also believe that, there are some filmmakers and DPs that take the same lighting package or camera package or lens package through every show because it's sort of what they love and what they dig. But I'm more of a, let's try things out. And like you say, find the right lens for the show, rather than saying, well, I've got a bunch of great anamorphic lenses that I own. I'm just going to take it on the show. Hopefully, it should, if I'm shooting it, so it should work. But I don't know. My discipline is a bit more like, I remember. In fact, it's interesting because Roger Deakins spoke about this. I think he did one anamorphic movie, and then the rest of his career was spherical, which is, again, that's his MO.
Yeah,
that's
cleanliness.
He doesn't like flares. He doesn't like, there's a lot of things that we do and do not like, but I think that the taste and the language of what you're shooting should be apt to the story, not the lens and the camera and what have you,
Well, and we all love a kit rental, but
we do.
There's kind of a narcissism to that.
Yeah, it's like I don't know. It's a lot of people own their own stuff, and I kind of respect that. But I'm sort of, the only thing I own is a remote head, because I just take it onto a show, and that's always a useful tool. But yeah, interesting. Also like the language of. I actually remember there was a really great Laszlo Kovacs was brought in to shoot Ghostbusters, right? And if you might be conscious now that you've said all this about, if you see Ghostbusters, he said to Ivan Reitman, he's like, well, I'm not really a bright comedy kind of DP. And he's like, no, I don't want to shoot Ghostbusters like a comedy. I want to shoot it like a atmospheric movie that happens to be funny.
Yeah.
And I did that was an intro. I was like, when I read that, I don't think I was conscious of it watching that. And I remember going to see it as a kid. And I remember loving it. And I remember thinking like, oh, this is kind of like cool, like this is a cool looking movie. So I find genre versus lighting is a very interesting tool, and I think you have to just take it project to project. On Candy, it was I just knew straight off the bat that I knew that it would be a very still camera movement piece. It was more about camera framing, and I also knew that I was really keen to try and shoot much more of a cubist approach. We actually pitched 1:3:3 as a ratio, but the studio were like, So it's definitely,
they're not ready for that yet.
Not quite ready for that kind of universe. They're okay with the bars on the top and bottom, but not left and right. So we ended up shooting Candy on 1:6:6, which I think was a sort of sweet spot. And the mad reference that I speak to people about this on Candy was Napoleon Dynamite, because it's got this. The show's quite quirky. It's kind of culturally, it's 1978 into 80, and so it's the outfits, the hair, the big glasses, the jumpsuits. Even though Napoleon Dynamite's not set in 1980, it feels like it is, But I was also reaching for that, what Napoleon Dynamite, which is more like the portrait photography, even on wides. So I was sort of going down that path, which I thought was kind of right. And kind of
you know, what's funny is I was going to get to this in kind of the back half, but we're already here. And especially talking about Jeff, I feel like it's easy to ascribe any sort of 70s murder thing to Zodiac, but it does have very Cronenwinthy Zodiac kind of vibes to it. Was that like a touchstone as well, or was that just sort of it?
Well,
my
no, I mean,
sensibilities.
I still love Zodiac. I mean, I'm an absolute true crime nut, and I kind of think that's. I mean, I'm still fascinated by that movie because it was shot on the very infantile sort of digital system.
Yeah, Viper, right?
Viper with like digiprimes. Do you remember?
Yeah.
But Harris Savides and Fincher, and it's quite a deep focus show. Like the movie's not necessarily stylized in that way, but it does, and it obviously has an amazing. I mean, what I always pull from that movie is I love how they use the color yellow. There's a sort of yellow theme that pops out on which listen, I could talk about this for hours because I know the Fincher's obsessed with All the President's Men and Alan J. Pakula. Like his work is all over Fincher's.
By the way, you're welcome to talk about this for hours. Please do.
Well, absolutely. But I do find like the decor and how the costume. Yeah, I guess. I mean, it wasn't a conscious decision for me. I've just had it always wedged in my head, like as a great freaking movie. And it's a movie about dialogue. Dialogue is a danger. I mean, there's no serial killer in it. The serial killer's in the dialogue. You know what I mean? You never freaking meet him. I think it's just genius. But no, I think definitely that kind of period. I mean, the other work I was looking at was more about, because I work from the inside out when I'm doing a show, so I don't tend to kind of immediately go out and watch or look at stills or paintings. But for this one, I was looking at the crime scene material they're very, very graphic and disturbing.
Sure.
I kind of felt I had to look at it. And, to me, I felt like I was starting to work on already the color themes because there was lots of, it's almost like Polaroid work back then. It was like very vibrant reds and yellows and blues and stuff. And so I was like then drawn to more work like William Eggleston and his work. Yeah.
2 of his books over there.
Yeah. So one of my heroes. But like he used the thing called Kodachrome dye transfer. So all of his famous work has got a very, like the reds really fucking pop, like leap out of the image,
Yeah, is that? Portraits. This book for anyone watching. This is a great. Tim Ives turned me on to this.
I'll get my copy and we can just go through it.
Yeah, we'll just share it. I tell you, I did an interview with Tim Ives and I asked him if he had any, like what he likes to reference. And he came back with a stack like this and just walked me through page by page. Like, this is a photo I love. This is a photo for like 20 minutes. It was the best.
Tim did the other show. Tim's done the other Candy show.
Oh, really?
Well, HBO have done the same story. It's called Love and Death. And I funny because I emailed Tim on prep, and I'm just reaching out because we shot in Atlanta, right? I've never shot in Atlanta, and so I was reaching out. I think it was a connection with something he did, and he emailed me and he was like, "Oh, I'm doing the other show, all the best." And then earlier this year at the ASC Awards, I saw him and we had a big hug and hey, and he was still shooting. His show's like twice as long. It's like 10 episodes. And, but I think a couple of teasers were out and he was like, oh yeah, it's looking great, man. That's the great thing about DPs, other DP was doing exactly the same story. But yeah, Tim's fantastic.
Did you guys, oh, sorry. I was going to say, did you guys kind of talk about your looks and try to like diverge at all, or maybe try to symbolize, or just no discussion?
No discussion. I mean, I only until I met him recently after I'd finished, but I would suspect he's gone down. Oh, well, I do know. I think technically he shot on the Panaspeeds, which is what I've shot on.
Okay.
I feel if I could speak for him, we've got the tastes are kind of similar. You know what I mean? Like I feel like he would have definitely gone down that same avenue. The thing that I didn't want to ever do was like the chocolate box thing of like filtration. I didn't.
Right.
I felt like filtration, particularly on any era, would have been too sort of processed. And so what we ended up doing was Panavision were doing the kit, and Dan Sasaki, the lens wizard, he detuned my lenses. So we never went on filtration. It was all like, it's almost like you sandpaper the image a little bit. It's a bit more, well, I described as being more like vinyl, like a vinyl record.
Right.
And actually, I think I just sent him the William Eagleson stuff, and he's like, got it. And he sent me, they actually did in-house tests for me because I was over in Atlanta. And I just got these tests. I was like, bro, nailed it. Here you go. So that's what we did. Yeah, we sort of detuned for a slightly, just like analog. I mean, there's a scene where Candy's listening to a David Soul record, and it's interesting because pop culturally wise and also culturally, like the 80s is interesting because I was chatting to somebody earlier on the podcast, and he said there's a big difference between 1980 and 1986. Like 1980
right.
is practically, literally the late 70s, but like you're talking about a turning point into new era, whereas the 80s, it was already finding where it was, Back to the Future, I can think of, Lethal Weapon, but so I found that kind of the detuning was the first time I was like, let's not filtrate, and let's just try and bake it in. And
I've found myself that I've kind of started to, maybe because I tend to shoot large format now, and there's just a lot more like data to work with. It's like I thought that the bigger sensor was going to give me sharpness, but it doesn't. When the image gets downscaled like that, it becomes smooth, and you don't really need filtration anymore.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a miscommunication. Like you think like you get these big screens, and the particularly makeup people, they're like they can. I mean, because I sit on set with a 55-inch OLED like DIT station that is in this roadie box, and it just pops up, and I've got full color control. And
you do your own color on it, like live grading.
For the last 3 shows, I've done live color. So,
awesome.
It's Spencer Schwetz, who is my brilliant, partner in crime, DIT. He's just a big brain, and he built this. If you want, I can send you stills if you want to add it to this. But
please.
Basically, it's a 55-inch calibrated OLED. So we have quad split. So we have three cameras on this show. So we have 3 cameras. It's all calibrated, and then we have live color. So basically, I'm watching it. In fact, I've got 2 TVs, the same TVs here. So I'm watching it exactly as it should be calibrated to the nation. When you watch. And of course, like it's really useful if you're doing a show like this, which is so color coordinated. So we basically started to kind of enhance like the reds, the kind of burnt yellows. I mean, when I read the script, actually, the color yellow leapt out to me immediately, and also I got thinking, the show's called Candy, so there's like a candy color kind of color theory in there. It's not like matte, it's a little bit, it's saturated for sure, but and then I would use to sort of bind the story together. I used sodium vapor. I remember as a kid back in then, those old dirty sodium vapor.
I love that color.
It's so good, and when it comes in, it's so kind of dirty. So I ended up like using that to bind together the houses and the suburban life. There's a scene where Betty's like in bed with her husband, and and you sort of then cut to Candy at this sort of dive bar, like dancing, like it's like a disco sequence. And again, it was like matching color themes, like because I wanted somehow to kind of connect these 2 rival characters. I mean, they're friends, but they end up being rivals,
right?
Because of an affair,
because of
small town.
It's in the trailer.
It's in the trailer, yeah. But it's I don't know what we were talking about initially, but I just love
detuning lenses and large sensors and stuff.
Yeah, I think and it's funny because like as soon as Dan gets those lenses back at Panavision, he undetunes them and just destroys all the paperwork. Like it's like you can't ever find the Coca-Cola formula with that guy. Like he's like the king of lenses. In fact,
But that's awesome, though.
he was given an honorary award at the ASC, which is amazing. Anyway, we were at and so David Panavision was like, Dan was walking up to go on stage. He's like, this is going to be interesting because Dan really doesn't say that much. He's quite a guy, but yeah. So yeah, but yeah, we're also going back to like Tim and all that, and William Eggleston, and I think he's always been a sort of great sort of I don't reference him on everything, but I find inspiration in his work. I just love the texture of his image, and kind of going back as well to live colors. I underexpose all of the neg in the camera, so really nothing should ever peak in any way. I really get like, I kind of get almost a little sick in my mouth if I see like a really clipping highlight. I just basically everything I do from the last 4 or 5 shows, I've underexposed by almost 2 stops, like on the raw. And that's what we were talking about, like resolution as well, right? So when you get resolution, yes, it does give more clarity, but it gives you more like range to play with. So when I underexpose, and you're automatically pulling the sensor to it's not to a breaking point by any means, because these cameras are just incredible. I was using the second.
They're all nuts. The Venice is great.
I mean, when you think you've like destroyed the sensor, it's still like, hello, I'm clear as hell. But no, but by the time you do that with the detuning and live color, I hope what I come away with is something that's got a little bit more of a filmic neg. I mean, I was really pushing for a neg, this show to fill somewhere between 16 and 35. It's got a little bit of spit and grit to it.
Yeah. It's cool to hear you say that, because I've noticed the same thing with more of these modern cameras. I have a C500. This is the most expensive webcam in the world.
Right.
But with this camera, especially, I think too, with like, especially RAW being more accessible, but even these like 444 compressed formats and all that, you are able, like, I find I'm putting skin tones at like 50 or under, like ish. Whereas shooting film, hell no. Classically, you'd want to overexpose skin by about a stop.
Yeah.
And actually, I wanted to touch on that. Actually, there's 2 things I wanted at the very beginning of this conversation. I said, you said 2 things, and I didn't get to the second one. So anyone who's bugged about that, I will get to it. But shooting film, you came up on film.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Kind of going to that Gordon Willis thought and stuff. What is, in your mind, the difference in the 2 formats from like kind of a practical shooting aspect, and also what is keeping most people, let's say, shooting digital from finding that more filmic look in your estimation?
Well,
and I don't mean photochemical necessarily, but
yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, I guess there's the classic conversation that was out of film versus video or digital, and so it was all about how we try to make digital be simulated to look like film. There was all of that discussion, and I'll talk about that. But there's also another really important angle that nobody talked about really, was discipline of film. Like the fact that the day before shooting, the DP, the director, the actors, we've got 10 rolls of film to shoot this scene. So your focus, it pushes you into a corner in a great way. Like when I was shooting on film, you'd be damn sure. I still remember to this day doing music videos, and the day before I would sort of hang out with the director, and he would test me on his shot list. He's like, what's the second shot? What's the third shot I've got down there? And, he'd shot listed the whole thing because he knew that he couldn't dick around, And so that then led to this, a much more different language of creation in filmmakers. So you're more focused, basically. I'm not saying that modern filmmakers now with digital are not focused, but I definitely feel people take the foot off the pedal and they can sleep a bit better. Roger Deakins famously said, the day I started doing digital, I slept like a baby,
Yeah.
I think that's good, but I just think that people should be a bit more aware about how digital gives you a bit too much freedom to keep rolling, or there's a double-edged sword because it depends on what you're doing, really. It's kind of like coverage,
Sure.
but I think that I think I always try to stay a bit more disciplined and just not. And I'm talking discipline as in how you approach a given scene. So the day before you do a lot of thinking, a lot of planning, whereas sometimes you're just rolling day to day and you're not even getting time to prep, and you know what I mean? It's a kind of it's a sort of vicious circle. So I'm talking about this in the sense of like, if there's a parallel world and that TV show was shot on film and this was shot on digital, how different would that show be in its language? And I really find that fascinating. I don't know what that would be, but I'd be pretty sure that there'd be a lot more creative, distinct choices about how they wanted to shoot a scene. And also, I think there's just this lovely moment when you hear the camera rolling and the reaction of an actor, I would say, is different.
Totally.
Than I think if anything, digital has made actors a bit more frustrated because they're like, he just wants to keep rolling. What are we doing? Are we done? Oh, we're going to go for another one. Oh, and it's like, whereas like, I just love the stop and start of film, that lightning in a bottle, that moment where it's just happened. You're not going to see it for 3 days, but I think that's exciting. And I think all of this together is also producing, studios, everything now has to be kind of everything's immediate, right? Everything. Right. Producers now see things immediately. Everyone, good or bad, seems to have an opinion about lenses now and cameras. I find that producers have a little bit more discussion and an opinion about things, which is fine. It's fine, but like ultimately, we got to remember where the craft came from, where DPs were completely in control of cinema. Nobody knew what that was going to look like until I remember years ago they brought a DP out of retirement to shoot a black and white music video, and he was lighting it, and they were like, "Oh my god, this looks terrible! This looks horrible, like terrible." And then the dailies came in, and it looked brilliant. So I think that there's that, but going to the other side of it, which is like simulating digital for film. I mean, that's been going for such a long time. I mean, maybe I think of all the filmmakers on the planet right now who's consistently very close to a sort of a filmic language is probably Fincher. Like this, the fact that he obviously works with top, A-list, Jeff being one of, just top DPs who also appreciate that. Yeah, exactly. They really appreciate that level of digital cinema. Like, I don't want to call it digital cinema, but that's kind of where we're at. But it's like, on Candy, we sort of did a tiny little film grain. So it was more like a print stock film grain. It's like 50D. 50, I think 50D. No, it was a print stock. It was very small, but it was enough for me to kind of go, it's sort of pushed it over to the other side. Whereas now I get, whenever I see like a trailer for a new movie and it looks so clean and so pristine and perfect, which is maybe the intention, but I'm not that person. I still love the 70s, I love The Conversation, I love Taxi Driver, I love, anything that Gordon shot, anything that Owen Reutemann shot, back when they were pre-flashing film stock, to get the actual exposure they needed. This is nothing like that is happening anymore. You can shoot, foot candles not even being talked about anymore. It's it's now ISO. You talk about the new Sony is now 3,200 base.
Yeah. The Venice 2.
Venice 2. I mean, I think it's amazing to give filmmakers the ability to shoot on fast lenses and all that, and, shoot at candlelight and all that. And of course, Kubrick was doing it, and he was there the first before everyone else. But yeah, I find the texture of film versus digital as an image very fascinating of what actually makes film look. And I remember we were doing the color sessions on Peaky Blinders, and the director said to me, I don't think it's about contrast. I think it's about midtones. He says, if you actually watch anything, in fact, there's a good friend of mine who shot a British TV show, she shot on 35, Conversations with Friends. and it's shot on film. And immediately when you see the trailer, there's very little in the way of expression or contrast. It's all about it's almost lower contrast. It's almost like there's obviously a lot of very the highlights are suppressed. But I remember back in that color session of Peaky Blinders, he was like, I think it's more about charcoal contrast rather than like what we thought was the contrast, which is pushing, and now it's more about pulling the other way. I think it's fascinating, really is.
Well, and you touch on two things. One that I think is relevant is having a palette. Like when you were saying you're given so many options now, like digital allows you to do anything. And not to Stan Fincher this entire podcast, but he's, one of the great touchstones is it's about what you don't do. That's going to inform what the audience is going to take in. If you do everything, it's very confusing. So it's like, what are we not doing? We're not going to use, in your case, handheld, whatever.
Yes. Yeah.
Because that's not what the show is.
Yeah. Dogma rules. I'd sooner go on the road with 3 lenses and a very disciplined dogma rule than go with like 25 lenses and be like, I find that's interesting. Of course, you have to be in the room with like talent. You have to be with a production designer, costume designer, hair, makeup. I've been so lucky on Ryan Murphy shows, particularly because he's like the king of, expression in a way. It's an explosion of, like costumes and color and, all the things that I love. I'd sooner talk about color than lighting sometimes, I think color theory is much more expressive and emotional. Lighting is almost just it's almost like just justified by, the means of the scene. So if it's a daylight scene and you're inside a house, there's going to be daylight in the house. How contrasty that is up to you. But the color of that couch or the color of that tie, to me, these decisions are much more important. And if you're not in the company of these great, incredible departments, then, I remember way back when I was only given like one wall to shoot against, and then slowly I had 2 walls. And by the time I got to Orion, it was 360, every day was 4 walls. And now we're in a world where everything's practical driven. So, it's the whole TV. We joke about this sometimes, like TV's like a lamp store sometimes,
Yeah.
Somebody joked about, I love The Crown, but very occasionally you'll see a scene in The Crown, you'll pause and go, that's 12 practicals. Come on. but at the end of the day, that
in each angle too.
and it's that kind of creative culture now. Like practicals was back in the day. What was I watching the other day? So I started to do research for this next project I'm on, and and it was really craft like it was more expressive lighting, and like the practicals were there, but the expression of lighting was not necessarily from the practicals. Whereas if you see, I'd say 70%, 80% of stories on TV right now, cinema TV, it's mostly practicals. And the choice of those creative practicals that you use.
Yeah. Because one other thing you were saying that I think ties into all this, that I was aware of, but it wasn't sort of codified until I saw this, which was, back in the 70s when we're talking about like all this cool kind of experimentation, and somewhat in the 90s as well, I've noticed, new technology seems to come at a time right when everything's getting good. And so the example they used was silent films. The camera was unencumbered by needing the massive ass blimp and all this stuff. So you could get really expressive with the camera. And right when silent film really started to come into its stride, sound came out and the camera got locked down, and everything was very static and very, because they had for technical reasons, not for creative reasons.
Yeah. It's interesting because back then, it's almost like you could do an analogy of camera shows. If there was a camera show for Hollywood back then, there'd be like 7 cameras. And now we've got like 100, right? And then beyond that, there's always new ones every single year, sometimes every 6 months. So I tend to not get too bogged down on like the technical elements of it. That's why I've got an amazing DIT. He teaches me about this.
Yeah.
And he talks about knits, you know. I'm like, what's a knit? I don't know what a knit is.
Split candles for screens.
Yeah, exactly. But but the thing is, like, that's not really the language of cinematography. Cinematographers need to like focus purely on, you know, the story and the emotions and all that kind of the classic stuff. But yeah, it's definitely. I mean, I still remember like when the 5G generation happened, and I was like, oh my god. And it was interesting because I was still shooting on film at the time, but there was a friend of mine, production designer, and she wanted to do this low budget period movie set in the 30s, and around that time, everyone was buying their 5D cameras, right, with their little super fast lenses, and I'd say everyone was then going out on the street. It was like most street movies at night, wide open, and they were like, "Oh my god, this is incredible! Look at this!" So I ended up shooting this movie like widescreen on a 5D with very considered static frames, you know, very, you know, almost like a one camera thing. And I was asked to go to a 5D presentation thing, and so I screened a clip of it. And the guy was like hosting it. He was like, he just didn't know what to say because he was like, "But that's like, you know, that's like a period movie. What's with, you know, we've got this amazing technology now that goes out and you can shoot in available light." I'm like, is that the point of this technology? Like, I don't know if that's the point. I think it definitely. Listen, it's a double-edged sword with what we're talking about because, I mean, what was it? Francis Ford Coppola, when he was making Apocalypse Now, do you remember he said, "Oh, there's going to be some fat kid from Iowa who's going to make a work of art with like a little kid phone."
Right.
And that to me is the analogy of what is going on. I think it's great that there's so many people that can go out and make stuff. You know, I mean, that filmmaker made Tangerine, right, with the iPhone. Yeah. Like, to me, it's like opportunities. If there's great filmmakers and artists and voices out there that basically have a chance to make something rather than they would never have a chance, then that's really great. So I think it's a really double-edged sword. But what comes with it is thousands of other filmmakers that have thousands of this and thousands of. I'm a director, DP, editor, producer. You know, like
the hyphenate.
Yeah, that's great. But I think, you know, I'm like, pick one. I'm a DP. I don't want to be a director. I don't want to be, you know, all that kind of stuff. It's, you know.
I've taken on the DP colorist hyphenate because I really love coloring. I wouldn't say I'm a professional by any means. I have colored a few like features, like indie features and docs and stuff, but it's so fun. But, you know, cinematography has one foot in post. So it felt like a necessary skill to have. But to your point about sort of the democratization of filmmaking, I think one thing that's very often forgotten about is the artist. You know, now especially, I hesitate to say the YouTube generation because it's like everyone's on YouTube, but so it's not like one group. But let's say the popular filmmaking on YouTube or whatever kind of ignores the entire history of cinema and is only taking from basically the 5D onward. Yeah. Which might invent its own language maybe in 100 years when it has enough time, you know, as film. But I find that kind of frustrating when people go, "Oh, I'm a DP." And it's like, okay, cool. Let's talk about the history of film. Like, what's your favorite film? Like, I don't know, old school. You're like, that's a great film, but let's talk, you know, let's eat your veggies a little bit, you know?
Yeah. I know. I think, but it's secular though. It's like we still have to appreciate the fact that yes, there was the Hollywood period, and then there was, you know, eventually we got to like the French New Wave, so they were doing that thing. It's not like it's like everyone's invited to make films, but I think you shouldn't do one short film and call yourself a DP. That's a bit much. I mean, like you have to understand a lot of stuff. But I also go, well, you know, we went through the dogma, you know, the literal dogma, you know, the dogma period in the early 90s, where, you know, people would go out with like handy cams and make a movie, and I think that there was this. I mean, for a moment, it was kind of like interesting and exciting, and it was like people like just having absolute freedom, which I think is what people love. And and it was going to be the new art form, and it sort of didn't. It didn't go away, but it was still a proving factor that it was a new generation of digital artists and filmmakers. So, I think I don't want to say that there's right or wrong in any of this. I just do know that my personal taste is I'm basically got one foot in the old and one foot in the new. I'm
Right.
I'm right in the middle, so I feel quite lucky that I grew up on the 70s movies and appreciated the discipline of that. But it's not to say that people can't pick up, an iPhone and make. Now that we've got iPhones with the freaking cinema mode, everyone's running out. But I think we need to draw the line on, because here's the interesting thing about the film industry: there's no door and there's no like you can make up your own resume. Like,
there's plenty of doors. You don't have to go through them.
You don't have to go through them, and nobody cross-checks your resume. Nobody checks that you've done this. Like, you could lie.
No one looks for your diploma.
Yeah, and so there's no exam, right? I mean, if everyone was examined in this industry and literally turfed out based on the results, oh, you got a C-, get out. They would. I think it would weed out a lot of things, but also, listen, it's the expression of life. We're sort of doing this and we love what we do, but I do find it fascinating.
Well, I think that's the point, especially using Dogma as an example, is not the Kevin Smith film, the
Lars von Trier and all
Lars
that.
von Trier, yeah. Is that was artists using modern technology to create art versus getting the technology, being very excited about how fun and shiny it is, and then coming up with your artistry afterwards, which I think is fine. Maybe you're fascinated by paints and then you become a great painter, but oftentimes it's the other way. It's how I was thinking about this the other day. It's like, yeah.
It's kind of like the difference between being a rebel and going out and doing your own freaking thing. Do you think it's a new art form, or you take what is given to you as a digital technology to try and simulate what you love?
Yeah,
that's the difference. Like, to me, I'm not into like being a maverick and doing the newest form of filmmaking. I'm thinking like I love, like we keep talking about Gordon Willis. I'm not ashamed to say, and I will keep referencing him. I still love how the thing about it is I find that he was kind of a maverick because he pushed things over the hill into a new arena. And there's certain filmmakers that occasionally do this that are freaking brave. I mean, I still remember to this day, actually, when Seven came out.
Oh, yeah.
Bleach Bypass was suddenly
good old Darius
thing. And Darius was like, I think it was like he was handed the baton from Gordon Willis, and he freaking ran with it. And so occasionally I think doing these things is great, but I think now it's on a level playing field. Like everyone, like you say, TV dark for dark's sake is not dark. It's not it. To me, there's a difference between gloomy and badly lit, and you have to understand darkness to sort of get it right. I mean, producers just run a mile if they fire you. Yeah. It's getting less and less, but I do remember actually Peaky Blinders was great because that the model for that, because I did season 2. The model for that on season 1, and again, this was somebody going out and being brave, is George Steele, who's great talent. He DP'd the first one, and that was basically The Godfather and Westerns, right? And he sort of somehow got that made through what is very much a conservative TV place at that time in England.
Yeah.
And if you'd said The Godfather, you'd literally been thrown out in your ear, like, get out. No, we don't do that. Whereas he sort of did that, and it was a sort of a hit, a cultural hit. And then I did season 2. When it came to season 2, they just said, we want more of that now.
Yeah.
But we've got more money. And so I remember that being a turning
We've got
point.
more money to use less light.
Yeah. Well, yeah. In fact, you said something earlier, and I find another thing is, I think Greg Fraser said this, amongst other people, that he says and actually Conrad Hall said it as well, is it's not about what you like, it's about what you don't like. And that's a very, it's a scary statement because like people get scared on that. I remember years ago going to see a movie that Seamus McGarvey had shot, it's High Fidelity. And I still remember it was one of his first major projects in the US, and he did, High Fidelity's, I don't know if you've seen that movie or no,
Yeah.
but it's is it Jack Black? It's a kind of like it's a record store movie, so it's not like this or that. It's sort of But he said there was one scene where he decided to shoot the characters against a window in silhouette, and the day after he got a phone call and he's like, turn more lights on because we're paying these actors way too much to be not seen. So it really depends on how much you justify and stick up for it. But I find it's fogey though. Like you'll meet producers and go, oh, let's do it like Euphoria, or let's do it like. I still remember one.
Oh, everyone wants to do it like Euphoria right now. Good God.
You know why they want to do like Euphoria? It's shot on film and it's incredibly disciplined. I mean, I think
I had a corporate client ask for that recently.
Yeah,
we kind of wanted to look like Euphoria. I was like, no.
Yeah. but then when you do it, they'll go, oh, it's a bit this or that. It's like, this is exactly what you asked for,
Yeah.
So I find that the trends in the industry, especially when you said there about meeting people who were their references are movies from like 7 years ago, you're like, I mean, I actually remember I was doing a scene and I had a little hazer and I had this PA that was putting the haze into the set, and I'd occasionally go to a reference so he'd know immediately how much to put in, because I'm focusing on the lighting and stuff. And I just said to him, oh, this is probably, I think we're going to go for Blade Runner. Like, I mean, it's a classic reference. And he was like, Blade what?
Oh, no.
And it was a kid, and like that, to me, that sort of part summarizes the cultural thing of like, I mean, the history of cinema and the respect for cinema and all that kind of stuff. But, it's like, it's going to be fascinating to know where we're going to be in 10 years,
Yeah. Well, and something that I've always thought about is that kind of keeps me on that, let's say, artistic track. Because I'm the reason I feel free to describe it like this is because I was not an artist at first. I should have got into props and special effects. That's really where I learned way too late in life that's what made me excited. Way cooler to make the lightsaber than to film it in my head.
Right.
But to keep me on that artistic track, I think of myself in a lineage. Who are the DPs that inform me, and how am I going to carry that message on and insert some of my own? Not just I'm not in a vacuum.
Right.
But also to your point about doors, and this is that second thing from the beginning of the conversation. I noticed on your website, your reel, the last reel you posted was from 2015.
Yeah.
What do people do now? Because every DP has said reels are dead. There's no point. Everyone's looking at your last project. What do people starting, or who maybe have, their careers going a little bit, how do you combat that? Because a reel at least lets you, I mean, that's the safety of a reel, right? You pick all your favorite shots and you go, look, I know what I'm doing. But everyone goes, I don't care. What's the last thing you shot? And you're like, oh, it was $1,000 for my friend from college,
Yeah. This is fascinating. No, the real thing, absolutely. To me right now, we live in a name drop generation. Like it's basically, if you say I just done Ozark or Euphoria, or it's like people get giddy and go, do you know who we've got? We've got the guy that, in fact, we had on Candy, we had one of the ADs couldn't stay. So that for the last episode they brought in like Atlanta was very busy, and like a couple of days later, Robin, the showrunner, was like, "Oh my god, you wouldn't believe it! We've got Tarantino's AD," and it's like but it was it was the AD from Reservoir Dogs, and I was like, this guy's gonna be a legend, and he was like, he's a great guy. But I find now that it's obviously attention span is like that. I mean, my website, I've got hundreds of scenes. Like if you want to clip, But I think sometimes they stop at the title. They're literally, it's an impressional thing. They'll go, oh, he did Pose, or he did American Crime Story. It's like, great, yeah, fantastic. I think it's that kind of generation now, which is fine. I was actually the other day talking to somebody about reels, and like I was building a reel to get more work, but
right.
Once you're out there and you're kind of going from job to job and you're appreciated, you don't need it. You definitely don't need it. I think if actually it's the reverse if you do it these days. If you put a montage reel at the front of your webpage, I'm not saying that this DP is not inexperienced. I'm just saying I think it's great to have like a 3-minute taster of your work, but you've taken time or you've got somebody to cut that together, whereas life's moving pretty fast now. Everyone's doing show to show or movie to movie. Is, if you go on anyone's, if you go on, Dan Mindell's website, like it's like, yeah, fucking shot Star Wars. I mean, he doesn't even freaking need it. He doesn't even need a website. Some of these people don't.
Yeah, it's just text. Dan Mindell, I shot Star Wars.
I shot Star Wars. Yeah. Hire me. You know what I mean? It's like, so I think, yeah, that's my opinion, really. I mean, it's.
Hold on, I got to go edit my website real quick.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I don't know. I just think, I think it's, I still remember coming up over up the hill, as it were, in this industry. And I still remember like a lot of people kind of even asking me when I was like 1/3 up the hill, like, who have you worked with? Who do you know? And I was like, that's no way to, you can't piggyback on me,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's good for producers of studios because it's a brand. They kind of know they're getting the goods.
Yeah.
They kind of know that. One of my private things I pride myself on is I like working fast. I like working at a clip. I don't work fast. That's a sort of a misnomer, but I like working efficiently. I like working with cameras where I can move them, place them from room to room rather than scattershotting coverage, that kind of stuff. That's the thing that but I don't tend to kind of, I mean, I can't even remember the last time I was sort of interviewed, which sounds really crazy, but for a job. Yeah. But, you get to a point where people sort of like, I guess you sort of like and I find this interesting because like I said earlier about choosing, say, to shoot all of your movies on, say, G series anamorphics, right? That's what I do. That's fine because people think, we're going to get really, really great kind of looking stuff. But I think if you have to sort of be a bit varied and be a bit more accessible. Whereas some people pick people purely on their brand,
right? And
I mean brand in the most positive sense. I'm not saying that DPs are pigeonholed.
Their style, maybe.
But what you're going to get if you're going to get.
Oh, well, yeah, and the brand being the things you've shot. Yeah,
exactly. And it's like I have no idea what the hell my brand is, but I kind of like, I love what I do. I love color. I love true stories. That's my main go-to. If I can get, and I love like anything original. I don't like being handed a 4th season of something. I draw the line on that kind of stuff. Yeah. I just think that I'm just like photocopying your stuff, and I'm not a photocopier. And just being, I remember when I was starting up, like I said, I was sleeping on a lot of couches. I turned down probably more stuff than I shot because I really was like disciplined in that way. Like it sounds really crazy to turn down work, but especially if you're like broke. When I was starting off, but I remember like, no, this is stupid. Like, why would I do this? It's like, so if you can sort of be disciplined in your approach, and I'm saying this to anyone listening that might be saying, well, I want to be a DP, is discipline goes a hell of a long way. Like it's just having respect for yourself, rather than just doing anything you can to, to sort of do it, because you do wear that on your lapel, it's like it follows you around a little bit. That's why if you've got like, I'd sooner do like 1 show a year than like 5, and just keep and I'd sooner try and focus on one properly than.
Well, and your work is like I wrote it down, like between Peaky Blinders, Ratchet, Krypton, and Candy, like they all. Hey, it's on your website.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, no.
But they're all, great looking shows, but all have their own. Like Ratchet's a relatively dark story, but we're talking about saturation with Candy. Like that's a very saturated, even kind of colorful
it's acidic is what I'd call it. It's incredibly expressive. Yeah, I've been lucky because that, like, even like I did Hollywood, I did Ratchet, I did Versace, I did Pose. These are all incredibly different genres in a way and different time periods. Impeachment was 97, you know, and and they're all, for me, I'm very proud of the fact that they're all their own voice. And
they're not pastiche either. It's not like we're trying to make it look like the 70s. It's like your feeling of what it should be, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's Brian Murphy, man. I mean, I mean, his work is just incredible architecture. I mean architecture, because it's literally like the scale of his sets are on par with anything that I've ever sort of seen. And when you get to, you know, I always say, like, when you get more, you have to work less, you know, you stress less. If you're given I mean, Ratchet was a good example. Like I said to people, like, it's almost like if they remade Cuckoo's Nest, but in the Four Seasons Hotel, that's Ratchet, you know. And I remember going into the soundstage for the main, the Asylum, as it were. And it's a fully functioning asylum. You could walk around, like you could go in there. And I remember doing a little iPhone what was those little iPhone Steadicam things? Forget the name of them. Anyway,
Zune, whatever.
Yeah. But anyway, I was doing a little sort of like, I just did a whole wanna around the whole stage. And to me, that's, your life is so much easier as a cinematographer to do that rather than being given, like I say, like 2/3 of a set where you have to sort of piece things together and work really hard to make it like live and breathe, you know?
I've said a bunch of times on this podcast that a lot of times the cinematographer gets a lot of praise for the production designer's work.
Yeah. I mean, when I was coming up, I did you know, obviously, like, the production designer was doing the best they can. But I mean, Peaky Blinders is a good example because Grant, the production designer, I think I had a nickname for him, was Napoleon. Like he was fearless. Like he was given like this much money, and somehow he managed to make this much set. And he was ruthless. I mean, he would like paint, like he'd paint this entire interior gold with gold leaf paint. You know, like this is so. If you're not in the company of those sort of people that are fearless and really try to bridge that gap and make it great, then their work's going to suffer because your work's going to suffer, that their work suffers. It goes in a vicious circle, and there's nothing worse than that, you know. It's also communication. Like if you're shooting a TV show or a movie and you're using some kind of process, you should show the costume designers that, because they should know that costume is going to be desaturated like 40%. And are they happy with that, you know? And this comes on to like depth of field, right? Depth of field is a really fascinating topic. Depth of field is shot to shot. I always feel like I have shot wide open, but that's only because I want to make something feel compressed and trapped. But I remember an argument I had with another friend, DP. Like I was like, if you put 2/3 of that set out of focus, the production designer is really going to have a hard time. I mean, it's not like it's not
going on their reel.
Not going on their reel. And like, yes, it does look incredibly pretty, but I also learned this really fast on the music videos I shot on film. I did a bunch of anamorphic ones, and I was working with an older focus puller, and he would educate me about, he's like, you know, 4T4 is the sweet spot. Like, it's like, it still looks freaking great, you know?
Yeah.
And now it seemsly like wide open is like, they always go, I mean, I just
1.5,
1.5, and I just find it really, I think a lot, it's strange because I have a lot of DP friends that have waves of this, they do it, and and they're constantly in work because it's a very beautiful, I mean, look at me right now. I mean, this is just a Doom effect, but like this is like
2.8.
Yeah, I know, right? It still looks great. You know, Deakins talks about this, you know, exteriors 5.6, you know, interiors 4. But if this is the shot and this is the apartment, and the art department have worked like overnight to make my apartment look great, and look at this is what we see.
Right.
It's crazy, really. But I find depth of field is like it's a great tool for moments that you need. And I think, you know, it's funny because there's what, like, I did one project where I sort of talked myself into saying, I'm going to shoot this at T8. And then I ended up shooting it a bit wider. And the focus puller was like, this is not what you said. Like, if you're going to tell me you're going to shoot this wide open, just be straight up. I wouldn't be here now, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the poor focus pullers, they have to, now everything's all wireless. There's no, I think the last time I saw a tape measure was maybe 3 years ago,
Yeah.
And
well, we got the laser measures now too.
Laser measures, but now it's like crystallization measuring. So you have like, oh, it's sharp because it's green.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Whatever it is. But no, depth of field is like, again, I could talk for hours about it, but I think, again, I come from a bit more of a, like, just damn it. Like, I love a good solid depth of field and a good solid grade and a good solid neg. That's my 3 things.
Yeah. I want to shift gears just a little bit because while looking through your work, I was very excited because I saw the Bells of St. John on your list. And,
Doctor Who?
Yeah, dude.
Really?
I'm a huge Doctor Who fan. And
Oh my God.
so I saw that and I was like, great, because I never thought I would ever interview a DP who shot Doctor Who just because, like, they get moved around and stuff and whatever.
Right.
But
Yeah.
talk to me about that experience because, it's a great episode. For anyone who
I called
hasn't seen it.
I called it the Matrix episode because
Yeah.
they download people, right? Is that?
Yeah, that's the one.
Wow. Well, yeah. So this actually was my agent said to me, he said, do you want to consider doing TV? Now you got to remember this is 2014, maybe 13. And I was like, hell no. I was like, what? No way. I'm not going to shoot. Of course, you have to understand that culturally, British television, British drama was very safe,
Oh, yeah.
But I grew up on Doctor Who like many, many people. And I was like, he said, well, I've got Doctor Who. And I was like, oh, okay. And I sort of just did it. I just said yes. Because I just wanted to shoot in the TARDIS. It was a really simple, like, that was it. I grew up watching the TARDIS, and I was like, and not just that, they just built a new TARDIS design, and I was going to be the one to set it up with the gaffer because there's lots of interactive lighting and stuff. But yeah, that was the sort of that was it really. I just became a 8-year-old kid again, and I was like, I want to meet Doctor Who, and Matt Smith, who was just
One of the best.
And he's an incredibly slender man, but he has the most energy I've ever seen on anybody. I was like, what is this guy?
I thought you were going to say the biggest head.
Biggest head. No, he's got the most energy. I was like, what is he sniffing? It's like, but no, it was great fun. And actually, strangely, because I did that. And that happened to be with Colin McCarthy, who is still to this day a great friend. And Colin was the one that was pulled out of the hat to do Peaky Blinders. So I did Doctor Who, and then I did Ripper Street, which was a period. It's like 1800s, and it was like, if you imagine a cop show back in the 1800s. So it's all told from the perspective of the police and police morals. It was very moral source. Of course, Peaky Blinders is about gangsters. But I did that show. So I'd basically done 3 hours of television. That was it, 3 episodes. And then I did Peaky Blinders. So it was just luck. I mean, I just, people can spend 20 years in television and still kind of, try to kind of get their hands on the kind of good stuff.
Right.
But no, Doctor Who, man. I'm so, you're the first person that said about that in a long time. And I'll tell you another story. When I got my first job here on the Versace, they had to process my visa. And in order to get the visa, you have to go to the embassy and you have to have some kind of, it's a very short interview, but you have to basically in about 10 minutes convince this 60-year-old lady behind the counter who's probably had a bad morning why I should go to America. And she says to me, she's like this, she's like, so what do you do? And I had to try and explain what a DP is. So I thought, I'm a cameraman, So I say cameraman. And she says, well, is there anything that you've done that I would know that would, you know, and I was like, you know, done Peaky Blinders. And she's like, what's that? And I panicked and I was like, oh no, she's not sure. I was like, oh, I've done Doctor Who. And she's like, stamp. Stamp. Because Doctor Who is global, like people, like everywhere. People in, you know, Timbuktu has watched Doctor Who, you know. And still to this day, you know, at the Comic-Con and all that, you know, it's still like very revered. So I'm glad I got to do one episode though. It's a little, I'm still proud of it.
It looks great. There was actually two things I wanted to ask about. One, were you sort of cognizant, or what were the discussions like? Because that Matt Smith series really started to define the new look of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Because the old one, if anyone has not seen Doctor Who, those first 3 seasons of the reboot, very fun. They do not look great.
No. I mean, the David Tennant period, it's very HD, is what I call it. I mean, and
not at 24p, 25, very British.
Yeah, it's almost interlaced HD. I mean, and it's also, I'm not saying
Eccleston stuff, I think, is.
Yeah, I'm not saying it looks. It's a funny thing because I think that the Matt Smith one. I think it was Damien Bromley who was the DP, and I remember seeing a clip from one of them. I was like, oh my god, this kind of looks kind of at this stage cinematic. I was like, this looks pretty cool, and there was something a little bit more earthy about it, and there was less like. I remember because the long story short is basically I was working with a gaffer. And there was I think it was a Polish DP. He's about 70 years old, but he was like, let's just put a 4K over the camera and let's put like a Congo blue gel on it, you know. And it's like, to me, that was like summarized like that language of that period, you know. Whereas the new generation with Matt was definitely, going down a bit more of an earthy, natural, quasi-cinematic look. When we arrived, I don't even remember the lenses. I think they were Cooks. But it's almost like the previous shows were shot on like ENG zoom lenses, you know?
Right.
It just, oof. But
and the lighting was hard,
expressive.
Yeah.
it definitely, you know, lots of color. I remember, but it's strange though because like the original Doctor Who's going back to the 70s. It was shot on film, right? And actually, I say shot on film. The location work was film. And this is the
classic Monty Python effect.
Monty Python, you know.
They leave a room and suddenly it looks like a movie.
Suddenly
like, what?
It goes from 16 mil to like, you know, live television, you know. But Doctor Who, God. Glad you brought that up.
Yeah, because the most recent woman who did a great job as the Doctor. I feel like she got kind of screwed.
Yeah, now they have a black Doctor.
Yeah, he's probably going to do great too. But the older gentleman, what's his name?
Yes.
Swears a lot in that one show.
Yes.
He's my favorite Doctor.
Yes.
Anyway, he was my favorite Doctor, but I really thought I loved the idea of like the damage that this man has experienced over 1,000 some odd years. Yeah. Like Matt Smith did a great job, especially in like the Spaceman episodes and stuff like that, where we really started to get into like how time has fucked with him. Yeah. But then when we got to I keep trying to say Christopher Plummer. That's not his name.
No. I'm gonna try and look that up actually.
Oh, thank you.
But like they almost went from like the 2020 generation to like, let's get I'm not saying he's old, but let's get the oldest person we can find.
Yeah.
But with a still, you know, who can crank it to 11 on energy, you know?
Yeah, I just loved that they were finally showing that damage, both in physically, but also just like how short-tempered he was with things.
Yeah,
like how many friends has he lost? Yeah, like how many friends has he lost? How many like loves has he had to let go? You know, like how many he had to sit in a box for 400 years or whatever. You know, like all these things that would fuck somebody up. I'm finally seeing, but from a cinematography perspective, that show, I think that season is when it really like went, all right, we're going full cinema on this.
And special effects got, you know, damn sight better.
Way better.
Peter Capaldi.
Peter Capaldi. Yes.
Yeah. Who's also a director. He directed a bunch of stuff back in the day. But
famously a bass player for the same band that Craig Ferguson was the singer in.
No,
they lived in a van together. Yeah.
Wow, Craig Ferguson. Now you're talking.
Yeah, Jesus. I want him back on.
Yeah.
Well, someone like him, man or woman, I don't care. I just want someone who gets back on late night and turns it into like, hey, we're all up at 1 a.m. Let's be goofy. Versus the kind of Daily Show copycats that we're kind of getting now. But all right, well, we'll have to wrap this up because I've kept you 20 minutes after. But
no, that's cool.
I'd love to have you back on and we can keep nerding out about Doctor Who or anything else you shot because you got a lot of great work on you. But
I'm off doing another one actually. I'm going to Toronto to shoot it's called Fellow Travelers. It's from the writer of Philadelphia. So that giving you an immediate signpost. So it's McCarthy witch hunt era and 80s AIDS pandemic kind of. It's kind of spanning. It's one of those talk about Doctor Who. So it spans from characters 20 years old to characters 60 years old. So it's a it's an interesting one. So another period thing.
We'll have to have you come back and talk about that when you wrapped it and it's ready to go.
Yeah.
But so the way that I end all these podcasts is by asking the same two questions. First one being, what is something you've read or maybe a piece of advice that you've been given that has stuck with you over the years that you think is that just keeps bouncing around in your head?
Well, I always go. I think I said it to you earlier, didn't I? It's like to me when this DP said this, he said there's good photography, there's bad photography, and there's the right photography, and I think that just really should make you think about what you're doing. Don't be following vogues. Do what is right for the project, and that can be a bit of a discovery of errors, but just do what's right. Don't do what's good. And also don't shoot something for your reel. Don't start like trying to get the biggest ray of light through a window, you know. You're not going to win awards by doing that. You're going to have a shiny reel, but you just do what's right for whatever you're shooting.
Oh yeah, because that's a dangerous one. You're shooting something and you finally get into a situation where like the shot looks amazing and it doesn't fit the rest of the show.
Yeah. You'd be damn sure it's on their reel.
Yeah, go to minute 5.5. Go to
there it
is.
And
it's
gone. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's excellent advice. The second question, a little more fun. Really, it was better for movies, but if Candy was in a double feature, so to speak, let's say everyone had this kind of time, what would be the other show or movie that you would program in?
Napoleon Dynamite.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. I mean, I could picture Napoleon Dynamite living down the road.
Excellent.
In that very, we didn't talk that much about Candy, but it's quite a quirky show. It's a dark story. It's a true story. And it's a very gruesome story, but it's about suburbia, you know, small town suburbia, and how the pressures and conformity of being a housewife trapped in your family. But anyway, from a aesthetic point of view, Napoleon Dynamite.
Perfect. Yeah, that because it's always fun to, you know, speaking of kind of interest, you wouldn't normally think those two next to each other.
No, everyone raises their eyebrows at that, but actually when they think about it, it's like, oh yeah, I see what you mean, you know, because to me it wasn't on the nose. It wasn't a reference that was like, oh, it just kind of it evolved, because I was just looking at the mood boards and the costume designs, and I was like, and the big glasses and the hair, and if you think about it, Napoleon Dynamite and Candy, I mean, Napoleon could be her son. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there was a sort of a quirky kind of side to Candy, so I think it's a perfect match culturally, but not an obvious one. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, and I love those answers too, because it's like you could pick a film that was exactly the same vibe, or the ones that are more fun, or the contrast. Speaking of Jeff, when Jeff was on to talk about being the Ricardos, I asked him that question and he goes, Alien versus Predator?
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I think references are fun, but I'd never like to be too on the nose, and I definitely don't like to be kind of like following trends. Especially I'm very hesitant to reference anything in the last 10 years if I can.
Yeah,
I think
Well, and it keeps you. That's like, right now I'm seeing weirdly enough, mini DV. The kids are really into mini DV right now.
Yeah.
Camera prices. My friend found a bunch of tapes and he was like, "Hey man, can I use your XL2? I was going to buy a mini DV camera on eBay. I thought it was going to be like $20 and they're like 800."
Yeah.
Cuz people are stockpiling tapes and shooting stuff cuz they want whatever that I assume it's some version of nostalgia, but it's
Oh yeah, I remember
it's fashion.
Yeah, the Sony Hi8 cameras. Yeah, the little Hi8 tapes. I remember those. Yeah, I think somewhere in an attic in my house, I have like hundreds.
Yeah, somehow that's the look now with the youths. And I don't know why. I guess it's just from their childhood. That. But to your point about not referencing anything that's 10 years or newer, I think that keeps you safely in the like reference category and not the trend chasing, as you're saying.
Yeah. And like I said earlier, don't follow anything that is in any way to make it feel like for your own sake. It's like can I reference Top Gun in this? Can I reference Razor Lost Ark? I mean, I've ticked a few boxes myself, I have to say. I mean, I've been lucky. We've done The Godfather. In fact, one show I did Razor Lost Ark. And Candy is Napoleon Dynamite, which is very unusual, but they're nice. I just don't think you should rest on them or lean against them too much. There is still room for originality, I think. It's a little tiny crack in the door, but you can do it.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, man. This is a great conversation. I can't wait to have you back on for your next project.
Yeah, cool.
Frame and Reference is an Owlbot production. It's produced and edited by me, Kenny McMillan, and distributed by ProVideo Coalition. Our theme song is written and performed by Mark Pelly, and the F&R Matbox logo was designed by Nate Truax of Truax Branding Company. You can read or watch the podcast you've just heard by going to provideocoalition.com or youtube.com/owlbot, respectively. And as always, thanks for listening.